Now, one of the ways you were able to grow both WPP and S4 is through acquisitions. You've probably made more acquisitions than pretty much anybody. What are some of your non-obvious learnings?
Well, if I had any non-obvious ones, they would become obvious if I told you. Our model is different. I mean, the S4 model is totally different. Um, One of the things at WPP, I think, was we did the earnout model. I was often credited as being the originator of the earnout model, which was tosh. I mean, it was rubbish. I mean, been there for many, many years before me. Um, Probably there since one of the Rothschilds sent the pigeons in the pigeon post at the Battle of Waterloo with the result of the Battle of Waterloo. So no, it's been around. But the trouble with the earnout model was that people didn't integrate during the earnout period, and that
Yep.
and if, for example, if you had a deal that was done by Ogilvy or by JWT or Y&R or whatever, uh, the natural human reaction was leave it alone in the earnout period, and you didn't prepare for the post earnout period. So I thought maybe a different approach where we call it a merger, not acquisition, where we bring in people on a 50-50 basis. In other words, you sell half of your equity for cash and half for stock. So 40% of S4 is owned by people inside it. Now, you would think that that model was more motivational, at least in theory. What's interesting, it comes back to the sort of question I touched on before. Um, People by their nature are not sharers. So if you have really good people in your organization, they tend not to be sharers in terms of information, and they like to take credit themselves.
Yep.
I think what the theory behind this model is that we would have people who not only were good but were sharers, and I think that's a really critical point. That's why I think AI is really going to be interesting, because the deeper you go down into an organization, the more you find the propensity to share is even greater. So people who have to do the nitty gritty and the hard lifting really really like the idea of sharing experiences, sharing knowledge, sharing information, sharing insights on an integrated basis. It's people running brands or running separate brands inside a company tend not to want to do that, which I think is a terrible mistake.
Isn't
So
there
I
some
think,
sort of like psychological thing? Like it's like I think of myself as on the WPP team rather than on the Ogilvy team, or and somehow you have to like
well,
switch
no,
from
that's
one
a
to the
brand.
other.
That's a branding issue, and you're right in the sense, if you start a company in your basement or your garage or whatever from zero, you're very attached to your brand. But our branding, Media Monks branding, which was developed by Wes Terhar along with his colleagues, it really gives us the flexibility. The media.monks. You can call yourselves formula.monks if you're in technology services, or data.monks,
Yep.
or digital media whatever it happens to be, or finance.monks or legal.monks. I mean, it's a great system for trying to bring that together. What you're saying is a little bit different. Um, and you have to remember that WPP, the companies you mentioned, JWC, Ogilvy, Y&R, Gray, were all NYSE listed companies. They were all trying to do what WPP was. So there was a
Yep.
natural sort of competitive element to it between the brands. Now, there are some examples. Arnaud's brilliant development of LVMH is based on individual brands that effectively compete with one another, and he is the master. I mean, there is nobody better in terms of managing brands on a global basis. In his case, in the luxury area. So, and the first half a trillion company in Europe. So incredibly successful. And runs it in a different system. So it is possible to do these things. But if you look at the holding companies, they are. When I was at WPP, we talked about horizontality, and that a word is now banned there, but trying to create one brand. And I think that's what you have to do. I think the power, McKinsey or Goldman are basically professional services businesses, I think, that have developed one brand.
And why is
I'm
one
sure.
brand? Why is it so important? Obviously, like
Well,
if you think of the
because
CPG companies like Procter and Gamble and Unilever, like
yeah,
they're
but
so
clients,
powerful because they have these other
yeah, but
crests as a brand or
yeah,
whatever.
but then there's always the cannibalization and the focus issue. No, because in our case, we have 9,000 people, close to 9,000 people in 32 countries, 57 offices, and what we're trying to do is to make all of those people available to clients as and when needed and where needed.
Yep.
And that's the key thing. So having a point of contact where you have access to the whole organization and the knowledge of the organization is critical. That is where you get the economies of scale.
So you're saying
These
like
are
maybe in services companies like a McKinsey, Accenture, BCG, it makes sense to have one brand, but like in more
yes.
product companies like a CPG or LVMH, it might make
Well.
sense to have multiple brands.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, WPP. I mean, I thought it was a market share battle, and so adding, Ogilvy to JWT made sense. The pattern of clients around
Yep.
Ford and Unilever, they'd actually, interestingly, David Ogilvy had a couple of conversations with the management at Thomson about merging before I got there. So there's that, and then Y&R made sense as well. Patent Ford again. In that case, they had Colgate, so we managed that separately. Part of the reason for the separation of brands was conflict, but
Yep.
now I think conflict is less of a significance. I mean, McKinsey and Goldman handle conflict incredibly well when you think about it by division and also temporally. I mean, they might be working for a competitive client for a period of time, and then they go work for the other client.
Yep.
So, or the competitive client. So, no, I think that the real opportunity now is to create one brand, one P&L, not have people fighting with one another to competing with one another, but using resources, leverage them. But it's difficult to do. It's difficult to do. You can build an argument that is far better, and Arnaud is a classic example of that. Has his separate brands, and as I understand it, they operate because constellation of stars. I think one of the creative directors described it as, and that constellation works brilliantly. There is no better. So there is no magic formula. I think you have to find it. But in our business, I think the game will be won by the companies that really integrate their offer and make available the offer and knowledge. I think you want to get to a stage where every one of our 9,000 people or so knows what the other 8,999 are thinking. That's why I think AI is such a big opportunity if properly executed.
And so it's hard to even know when to integrate the brand. If you think of like Google, okay, Google Maps was integrated from an acquisition, but YouTube was always kept as a separate brand. And so in some cases they did the
Yeah.
integration, in some cases they didn't. It's hard to know like a priori what to do what.
Well, I think that's true. And you see it in product companies as well. When product companies buy, a digital asset. They're an analog company and they buy a digital asset. Do you keep it separate?
Yep.
Do you integrate it? Do you keep it separate for a period of time and then integrate it afterwards? I mean, there are littered. The world is littered with examples where that fails. The management of the digital company is very entrepreneurial and they don't like to be integrated in any way, shape, or form. And people leave, etc. So it's difficult to maintain the balance.